It could be quite easy to overlook just how good Shai Gilgeous-Alexander's actually been this season, especially considering how all other MVP contenders have had statistically insane seasons so far. Nikola Jokic is averaging a near 30-point triple-double on crazy 67% effective field goal shooting. Giannis is averaging 29 points while shooting 64% from the field, while Luka is straight up leading the NBA in scoring, putting up 35 points per game. But then there's SGA, who's casually dropping a 32, 4, and 6 stat line on equally efficient 56, 45, and 88% shooting splits. One might say that what Shai's doing this season isn't really anything special. He's not close to averaging a triple-double, and he's always been an efficient scorer anyway. But here's the kicker, Shai's actually doing all of this while posting a 69.1 true shooting percentage. Not only is that a career best mark for him, but never before in NBA history has a player averaged more than 30 points while also having a true shooting percentage higher than 67%. That is, until Shai's been doing it this season. This now puts Shai on pace to produce the most efficient high-scoring season in NBA history, even topping the 66.9 true shooting clip that Steph Curry put up during the 2015-2016 season, which is when he won his second straight MVP award, in a campaign wherein Curry, fresh off winning a championship, looked even more impressive. Coincidentally, this is similar to what we're witnessing with Shai so far. Fresh off a season wherein he just won the scoring title, the regular season MVP award, the finals MVP award, wherein he made the All-NBA first team and won the NBA championship, somehow, Shai looks even better, and I mean better at virtually everything he does. But here's the thing, Shai reaching an even higher level this season might be hard to notice because his raw counting stats don't seem as eye-popping as that of other MVP contenders. Well, so far, in terms of 40-plus point games this season, Luka Doncic has 5 and Jokic has had 3. Meanwhile, SGA's only had 2 40-plus point games so far. That might seem underwhelming until you realize that the Thunder have started their title defense in such a dominant fashion to the point that they've actually defeated teams by an average margin of 17.5 points this season, which also happens to be the biggest average win point differential in NBA history. They've often trashed their opponents even before the fourth quarter begins, and as a result, out of the 25 games SGA's played so far, has only been needed by OKC to play in the fourth quarter in 11 of those games. Well, it's also easy to point out how Shai's only had 2 games wherein he's had double-digit assists this season, until you realize that OKC's only one of 7 teams this year who's had at least 8 players averaging a minimum of 2 assists. Then there's the fact that Shai also doesn't have a double-digit rebound game this season. But does he really need to grab a ton of rebounds when OKC's got Isaiah Hartenstein, who's a top 10 rebounder, as well as Chet Holmgren, who's also a top 30 rebounder this year? So maybe Shai's numbers haven't been eye-popping because they simply don't have to be. Now, it's definitely too early to be debating about who's supposed to win the MVP award, but for sure, this is the part wherein people are going to be pointing out about how Shai seems to be doing less compared to other MVP contenders. Sure, SGA doesn't score the most, that's Luka. Shai isn't the most efficient, that's Jokic. And while Shai is an A-plus defender who's got a very high steal rate, people would point out that Giannis is still the better all-around defender, given how apparently Shai's defensive numbers are more influenced by OKC's monster defense rather than Shai's play itself. And yet, the Thunder are not just better than all of Jokic, Luka, and Giannis' teams, but specifically, OKC's better with Shai on the floor in terms of margin. OKC's outscoring opponents by a massive 16.8 points per 100 possessions with SGA on the floor, a much better mark than what the Nuggets are putting up with Jokic, than what the Lakers are putting up with Luka, and what the Bucks have had with Giannis. Sure, a lot of this is because of just how OKC's got better all-around roster construction than all of those teams, and the fact that OKC's also been playing the best defense that the NBA has seen in decades. But still, it's hard to deny the fact that Shai's been the main driving force of the Thunder's dominance, especially when you dive into the most commonly used impact stats in the NBA. Take a look at almost every all-in-one advanced statistic that there is, whether it be PER, Bucks plus minus, estimated plus minus, or win shares per 48 minutes. And you'll see that Shai, for the 4th consecutive year, is on pace to have a career best season in all of those advanced metrics. So the question is, how is it possible that someone who appears to do less and less of the things he does is actually impacting winning so much, especially for a historically dominant OKC team? And should we really hold it against Shai if he appears to be doing less than other MVP contenders? To make sense of all of this, we first have to look into Shai's scoring. First off, this is gonna sound like blasphemy, but so far, Shai might have already surpassed Michael Jordan's peak level, at least as a regular season scorer. Looking at it, Michael Jordan's best pure bucket-getting year was actually his first MVP season in 1988, when he put up 43.6 points per 100 possessions on a true shooting percentage which was 12% higher than the league average. But then Shai last season, during his first MVP campaign, already put up a much better 45.9 points per 100 on a true shooting clip that is 11% better than the league average. But then again, this season, Shai's putting up an even better 47.4 points per 100 possessions on a true shooting clip that is 13% higher than the league average. Basically, SGA's having the purest bucket-getting season of any player ever in terms of efficiency. For context, the only player ever to top SGA's point production per 100 possession output this year has been prime James Harden in 2019, when he put up 48.2 points per 100. But then the difference is that Harden actually did that while averaging nearly 21 more touches per game than Shai's having this season. Well, so far this year, Shai is averaging just 66.8 touches per game, which is a small amount of touches compared to that of other MVP contenders. Jokic is averaging more than 98 touches per game, Luka is at 94, and Giannis is at 71. And yet, despite averaging the least amount of touches, Shai still leads all four players in terms of points produced per touch. Meaning, Shai has the ball in his hands less, he initiates less, he warps the defense less by not having the ball as often as other MVP contenders, and yet he scores more. That is also despite him having a smaller usage rate than Luka and Giannis. Well, last season, Shai already became possibly the least ball-dominant scoring champion in NBA history when he produced .45 points per touch on just 71.7 touches per game. But as the numbers indicate, this season, he's scoring even more despite having less chances to do so. We can credit the skyrocketing efficiency to Shai becoming even better at getting to his spots, by polishing his extraordinarily tight handle even more, and by utilizing his elite change of pace and his sudden stop-and-go footwork to an even greater extent, which allows him to just basically get to wherever he wants to on the floor whenever he wants to. The shot profile actually speaks for itself. Shai's converting 59.5% of his two-point attempts and 45.4% of his three-point attempts so far this season, both of which would be career-high numbers for him. Also, look at almost every play type you can find, whether Shai's operating as the ball handler in the pick and roll, whether he's operating in isolation, off transition, or even when he's operating from the post, Shai's been putting up career best numbers, which also all rank within at least the 90th percentile of the NBA this season. Even his pull-up three-point shooting, which has long been considered the weakest layer of his offensive game, has now turned into a legitimate part of his scoring arsenal. This season, Shai has found a terrifying rhythm from deep as he's looked more comfortable hunting for his signature step-back three-pointers again and again and again. This has allowed Shai to shoot 46% on pull-up three-pointers this season, which is another career-high mark for him. And for context, out of all 36 players to have attempted at least 50 of those pull-up three-point shots so far, Shai's mark is actually the second best, only behind Jamal Murray. Well, to be fair to other MVP contenders, I'm not buying the idea that Shai's supposed to look more efficient solely because he takes more jumpers compared to, say, Jokic or Giannis. The thing is, all three of them all score 30 points per game or nearly 30 points per game. Jokic and Giannis both attempt 17 shots per game, while Shai takes a little bit more with 19 shots per night. What I mean is that I'm not gonna punish Jokic or Giannis for being bigger and shooting more at the rim because they make the shots after all. But I definitely do buy into the idea that teams just can't pack the paint to try and stop Shai from scoring the way they try to pack the paint to try and stop Jokic or Giannis, simply because Shai's just a more versatile scorer even from the perimeter. In fact, this season, out of 18 players who have taken 100 jumpers off the dribble, Shai's effective field goal percentage off those self-created jumpers has been the second best in the entire league, only behind Steph Curry, who, by the way, is the greatest jump shooter of all time. But then, aside from the scoring, we also have to talk about Shai's playmaking. Well, Shai's averaging just under 40 passes made per game this season, which is way below what guys like Jokic or Luka have been making. However, Shai's still averaging 9.3 assists per 100 possessions, which is again another career high mark for him. Sure, most of Shai's setups are simple. Oftentimes, he'll just make the straightforward read wherein he draws two to the ball, plays off 2 feet, keeps his eyes up, and then makes the pass to a wide open teammate. But then, there are those moments when he'll just dish out a flashy one-handed laser pass pass to Chet Holmgren in the paint, or sometimes off the break, he'll just casually throw an unexpected behind the back to an open Isaiah Joe who's just waiting on the corners. All in all, Shai has assisted in more than 33% of his teammates' baskets when he's on the floor this season, which is a career high mark for him, and yet he's rarely turning the ball over, which is a 6.6 turnover percentage, another career best mark, and also much lower than the turnover percentage of all other MVP contenders. Again, you won't mistake Shai for Jokic or Luka as a playmaker, but the point is, Shai makes the passing reads he should be making when he's on the floor, and most importantly, is not making mistakes with the ball. In fact, other than Shai this year, the only other player in history to have a full season with a usage rate above 32% and a turnover rate below 8% has been Michael Jordan during back-to-back seasons in 1997 and 1998. And while the Thunder haven't needed Shai to close out many of their games due to their dominance, whenever they found themselves in sticky situations, Shai still delivered as the best closer in the entire league. This season, Shai still leads the NBA in terms of scoring in the clutch with 87 total points in the 53 total clutch minutes he's played so far. And the crazy thing is, that's already more than the 67 total points that Shai scored in the clutch in all of last season, which is why I won't be surprised if Shai also ends up as the frontrunner for this season's Clutch Player of the Year award. Obviously, the Thunder don't depend on Shai the way the Nuggets depend on Jokic, or the way Luka's teams are complete ecosystems around Luka, or the way the Bucks are a total Giannis team. But then if you come to think of it, that's also healthier for OKC in a lot of ways. There's no guilt when the Thunder loses despite Shai scoring 30 points, like there is guilt with Denver when they lose after Jokic drops a monster triple-double. For OKC, there are no long stretches wherein players just don't get to touch the ball like with Luka, and also the Thunder aren't throwing Shai into a meat grinder physically the way Milwaukee are with Giannis the entire year. Well, it's not that OKC doesn't need Shai or that they could win the NBA title again without him, because that's not true. But I think it's just that the Thunder don't need Shai to set the table all the time or to physically dominate for them to win. The Thunder win mostly because of their historically elite defense, but that defensive system also doesn't revolve around Shai. However, Shai still fits eagerly within what the team does, refusing to shy away from defensive responsibility just because of his massive offensive workload. And it definitely helps that Shai's also one of the better guard defenders in the entire league, who currently has the 16th highest defensive estimated plus-minus rating this season, who also ranks 23rd in steals per game and 19th in deflections per game, who just happens to play for the most dominant defensive team that the NBA has seen in decades. So, despite all of this, why do people still feel like Shai doesn't contribute as much as the others, even if what he contributes is potentially more impactful to winning? The question is, would you really rather have Luka, who's a way better passer and who scores more in volume, but who also wastes a lot more possessions? Would you rather have Giannis, a way physically more dominant specimen and more efficient overall, but in more touches and a heavier workload? Or would you rather have Nikola Jokic, obviously the best player in the world, but isn't Shai's pure bucket getting without turning the ball over approach a lot more direct? Well, I think the key here is not to downplay what Shai does or how good he actually is, because as it stands, he is the best player and the leading scorer of a Thunder team who's on pace to win 79 games this season. But for sure, I think it's important that we're accurate when talking about why and how players are actually great, and that's why we're having this conversation right now. The thing is, in the past, there were conversations about Steph Curry being a great passer and actually a good defender in his prime, which is definitely not true. So let's say, hypothetically, what if Shai were in a system where he needs to be a James Harden type of player? Could he actually do that? Well, probably not. Shai might be a better playmaker this season and still not be the offensive engine that James Harden was overall. But still, that wouldn't make Shai any less of a player because Shai is elite at what he does. Again, the Thunder mostly win because of their defense. Their offense is elite, but their defense is the most elite potentially ever. But that doesn't alter how good Shai actually is. Looking at it, he's currently the best half-court scorer this season in terms of points scored per possession, slightly above Jokic, and his gap with Luka is even bigger. But then again, these are things to look at later if everyone stays healthy enough to play 65 games, allowing them to qualify for the MVP award, and that's for a totally different conversation. Outside of the scoring, Shai doesn't rebound as much, but the Thunder don't need him to. Shai doesn't pass and create assists as often, but the Thunder don't need him to. All they need him to do is to defend like he does. They need him to not turn the ball over, which is already doing, and they need him to become the best guard scorer ever since Michael Jordan, which honestly he already is. Crazy thing is, Shai's only 26, so in the future, we could very well be witnessing a version of SGA who's doing all these things better, more often, and much more consistently. And that kind of player sounds like one of the best players, not only today, but of all time. So thank you guys if you've actually made it this far into the video, but what do you actually think of Shai Gilgeous-Alexander's season so far? Feel free to drop your thoughts in the comment section below, and again, if you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing as well. Again, this has been Real Balls, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace.